You guys don't take Altoids? Altoids came out with a new,
Does it like Flintstones or what?
a new yellow version of Altoids. Perfect.
When you take love, our moment is like ships adrift with
Look on now.
I'm ready. I'd have to say it was more of a music video that I saw on MTV. It was Shout at the Devil from Motley Crue.
Well, the first album that I owned was actually, I think it was Debbie Gibson, Electric Youth. That didn't get me into music though, that didn't do the trick. I think it must have been like Metallica, probably the Black Album.
The one that I really gravitated towards when, you know, I was influenced with like friends playing music and things like that, where the Metallica Justice for All album had just been released, and just like the aggression and how ferocious and the sound, like the triggers of the drums and the guitars and how locked and tight it really sounded, and the growls. It really resonated for something. It, you know, really brought obviously a feeling of being alive at that moment. Nirvana's Bleach had just been released as well, and then we were listening to Alice in Chains. So there was obviously a dynamic change that was happening at that point in time.
The first Rage Against the Machine album, I probably have to say, is one of those that I can just, from start to finish, press play and let it go. I was kind of in a weird place when that album came out. It was about, well, not when it came out, but when I was exposed to it, it was like maybe 96, 97. My dad had just passed away, so I was kind of going through a lot of changes in my life, and kind of a lot of the sentiment in terms of, I guess, just musically, sonically, like the anger sort of resonated within me, and I gravitated towards that sound.
My very first memory of music is an opera, actually. My parents took me to the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. There was an opera called Where the Wild Things Are. It was my favorite book. And my folks were like, I think it was like something through my kindergarten class or something. Like I was like 4 or 5 years old. I remember I remember very few like fragmented things, but I remember being captivated that this book had come to life and there were people singing about this book right in front of me, and I was just awestruck.
So, you know, I was into obviously things that were very hard, but also things that were really melodic. I had obviously things that, you know, earlier bands in my childhood that were a huge already influence. I was already listening to bands like Oingo Boingo, Dead Kennedys, Rush, Berlin, Missing Persons, you know, Mozart, Beethoven. So there was a lot of things to pull from.
Well, you know, it had to be Enter Sandman at first, and then you hear that and you go back and, you know, hear the earlier stuff, and it's completely different.
It just really like drew me as far as like live music goes, and you know, with videos, and growing up watching MTV, like I was more into like, I guess, more new wave music, and my cousins were more into hip hop, but one of my uncles, he was just really into like heavy rock and metal and stuff like that, and he started getting me more into that, and it made me more want to play live music or pick up an instrument, or you know, and I didn't for a long time, because I was, at the time I was probably like 6 or 7 years old or something like that. I don't know. I don't know what year that song came out, but I know it was early 80s.
My dad loves music more than I think I will ever love music. And I've made a career of playing music, but my dad loved music more than anything. And I remember him introducing me to Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. I remember him introducing me to Led Zeppelin. He introduced me to the Beatles. He introduced me to Carole King. That Tapestry album is amazing. It's incredible. And then I think by the time I was 10 years old, I started to figure out my own taste. And I remember getting No Doubt. That's what it was. I got No Doubt.
Yeah, where I grew up, music was obviously the main focus, or how I grew up, I should say. Music was always the main focus. So there was some sort of obviously device that we had access to when we were listening. There was actually music television back then. So there was a lot of actually videos that we would watch that really influenced us as well.
No, I was on CD. I was on CD. But you know what? Now that you mentioned tape, I'd have to maybe revise my answer and say that it was Green Day Dookie. And Green Day Dookie to this day is probably one of my favorite albums, man. I had that one on cassette. That was about maybe 1994. 94, 95, I got the cassette, and then I ended up getting it on CD, and to this day, like, everything from, the way the songs are written, the content, to the production quality of the album, I love everything about it. Everything. Yeah.
There's someone that I hear every day now, because of all the information that you're bombarded with every day, or you can seek out information. I hear someone pretty much every fucking day now that still just turns me out and lights me up. What drew me to drums? Someone asked me this the other day, and I think it was because it's the only instrument that you could play in like a rock band that you could sit down. Yeah. Big into sitting.
At the youngest age, when I first saw Tool sober, it was really a shocking video. I was very young, and I didn't understand what I was watching, but I know it was something amazing and just interesting and dark, and the music itself was just almost like an awakening of some sort.
But I think it was like the whole time growing up, I knew I wanted to play music and stuff like that, but other things took interest, like art and skating and stuff like that, and I didn't really think about music so much till I got a little older. I think I was maybe 13 or 14, and I think it was a friend of mine, he started playing guitar, and we always listened to rock, growing up, and I liked bands like Nirvana and Alice in Chains and all that stuff growing up in the 90s and stuff. So I decided, I'm like, I'm gonna learn how to play guitar. And once I started learning how to play guitar, I learned other people's songs. So I learned Stairway to Heaven and Led Zeppelin songs, and then I started learning Tool songs. And once I started getting into stuff like that, I was like, man, I wanna write my own stuff. And luckily at the time in high school, I met some guys that were playing in a band, and I jammed out with them a few times, and then it just went from there. And I stopped learning other people's music, and at that time I was listening to a lot of punk music, but also bands like Alice in Chains and Tool, Depeche Mode, stuff like that. So I listened to a wide variety of music growing up. But around that time when I finally started playing guitar and writing my own music, it started off with just mainly a lot of punk, because I couldn't really comprehend a lot of odd meter time signatures or anything like that. It was just a lot easier to do 3-chord progressions and 4/4 timing and stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much where it started from.
Through all the genres I listened to, there was always going to be that one song from that one artist. Metallica, that Blackened, when it first came out, was huge. Obviously, Sober was, like I said, another really big thing. I always was a huge fan of Rush, and that that has even stuck in with me till today. So it's obviously been a meter for myself to really listen to, and a bass player I myself really look up to, and has been an inspiration throughout my years.